Chair of Petroleum Engineering at Okay.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So, sorry, the second panelist is Martin Blunt, who is Professor and Chair of Petroleum Engineering at Imperial College London. Then the third panelist is Carl Hickson, who is a Head of Talent Projects and Education at BP. And the fourth one is Jonathan Redfern, who is Professor of Petroleum Geoscience at University of Manchester and Energy Transition at CMT. We'll start with a short introduction from our panelists. And if Alix wants to start.
Thank you very much, Elisabetta. And thank you for the invitation to come along this evening. It's a real great opportunity for me to get access to such an important audience, so much appreciated. So I've spent over 30 years in oil and gas in the HR function, much of it as an employee relations specialist, but also a number of years as a generalist. And for the last 10 years, I've been in Oil and Gas UK, which is a leading trade association. And so my role is to look at policy in the field of employment and skills. But part of my current role, one I've just taken on, is to be lead of the people and skills work stream of the North Sea transition deal. And I'm not sure how familiar you are with that, but I'll be referring to it this evening because, as I say, one of the strands, one of the priorities is in the people and skills area. The first thing I'd say, though, is there's lots of good news for you all. We know already that there's a high level of occupational transferability from oil and gas into other sectors, in renewables, nuclear, and developing areas which are of particular interest under the transition deal, such as carbon capture and storage and development of hydrogen. We also know that oil and gas are going to be a critical part of the energy mix for many years to come. So the lights are not going to go off on our oil and gas industry tomorrow. There's a huge demand out there, which will continue for some time, and that needs to be met. And we can't meet that responsibly by offshoring it, where we have no control over emissions of how oil and gas is produced. We're very aware that there is a moral imperative, which is recognised by industry and the government under the umbrella of the transition deal. And you will have seen possibly the creation of a Green Jobs Task Force by the government as part of its 10-point plan. There's a moral imperative to ensure that the workforce and the communities in which the oil and gas industry has a footprint are taken with us on the transition, and we don't leave anyone behind. That's really important. But there's also a strong business imperative and business case, because quite frankly, the energy transition can't happen, can't meet our net zero objectives without the skills and the talents of our workforce. We need them to meet the ambitions and the aspirations and the challenges that lie ahead. So we're doing all that we can to ensure that we hold on to this precious resource so that not only can we retain people in employment in oil and gas, but we've also got the skills there as other areas ramp up. And I'm sure that will come out in the questions tonight. Absolutely, our sector has the skills and the expertise in the bucket load to play a leading role in the development of the technologies which are going to be key to achieving net zero ambitions, particularly CCUS and hydrogen. And what we're seeing is many of our member companies, and we have over 400, are already diversifying into wind, nuclear, carbon capture and hydrogen. There's a huge amount that we're just not aware of going on out there, and we need to tell our story a bit better. So we're seeing very much companies moving away from being oil and gas companies to energy companies. And that's what we see people doing in their employment, not thinking that I work in oil and gas, but I work in energy. I think we all need to start thinking in a less binary way as we tell the story of what the industry has to offer in the transition and as we think about ourselves and what we do. There are challenges ahead because we don't have all the answers right now. This is going to be a bit of a journey. CCUS and hydrogen are at early stages. We're working hard to develop a clear picture of what the demand is going to be in all of the other energy sectors, including those, over time, so that we can be open and honest and prepare ourselves as organisations and our workforce for what lies ahead. And they are key deliverables of the North Sea transition deal. So within a year, we should have a clear picture of what the demand will be in various parts of the energy industry going forward and mapped against time. And that will help us start to move people across as we need them. And there will be peaks, of course, in the short term, as there are capital expenditure projects which take place before we get to the steady state, which is probably some way off. And as we do that, one of the other things that we're very conscious of that we need to improve on is our performance as an industry in diversity and inclusion. And there's never, in my 30 years in the industry, there's never been more of a focus on this. And it's not just because it's the right thing to do, though it absolutely is. We're going to need all of the innovative thinking, all of the skills, all of the ability to embrace new technology and new ways of working that we can muster to meet the very challenging targets that have been set and society's expectations. And the exciting thing is that we, all of us here on this call, have the opportunity to be part of the solution. And how many people can get to say that? So I probably don't want to say any more by way of introduction, but other than I know from the pre-meeting that I had with the panelists that we're going to have a really interesting discussion ahead. In just half an hour with them, I learned so much. So I just want to say thanks again for the invitation and the opportunity to be here.
Thank you very much, Alix. Carl, do you want to go next?
Yeah, thank you. Likewise, thank you for the invitation. And I think, yeah, echoing Alix, we're in for, I think, a vibrant and exciting discussion today. Unfortunately, I'm probably likely to echo some of what Alix said. So my introductory remarks may be a little repetitive, but I think bringing it to life through the perspective of a company that's going through this transition at the moment. And we all know climate change is one of the biggest challenges we face as a society and as humanity, but at the same time, it is a tremendous opportunity to rewire the world's energy system. And it's going to be hard work, but it's also bold and exciting work. And I think kind of as Alix talked about that decarbonisation agenda, we are well on our way through a lot of that journey and how we're thinking about it. And I think the first thing I would say is we're not turning our back on oil and gas. As Alix said, hydrocarbons are a core part of the energy mix in a lot of those forecasts and a core part of our strategy. But actually, it's very much about no longer being a hydrocarbon company. It's about that integrated energy company play where hydrocarbons are a smaller part than they might be, but still a really important part of the value we can deliver. And I think kind of what that will come out as is look in parallel at some of what we're growing. Kind of by 2030, increasing a lot of our low carbon energy investment by tenfold, developing a huge 50 gigawatts of net renewable capacity by 2030. And we're looking at some really big and bold shifts. And I think when we talk about kind of what that means for skills, at the heart of that, we're always going to be an organization looking for the best talent, that really reflects the diversity of the communities we work in order to deliver against those really ambitious and really big goals. And I think there's probably two messages I'd share in my introduction. I think one is just the volume of opportunity that's out there and how different and varied a career could look throughout the transition. And second, kind of a few remarks on the importance of education and what we will need from that space over time. And my role kind of touches on both of those within BP. I wear one hat really thinking about how our talent organization comes together and how kind of our work across the talent acquisition, learning, leadership spaces really comes together in an integrated way to enable us to deliver those goals, but also run all of our kind of external education and employability work. So the perspective there on what we might need for the future. And I think on the first of those topics, kind of that tremendous opportunity that's out there, I think echoing again Alix's, the transferability of many of these skills is huge. And I mean, when you look at where we are as an organization, 16,000 engineers and operations specialists, thousands of biofuels experts and things like that. And the ability to use that talent to deliver the transition is critical. And I think kind of a lot of that will continue to be focused on the oil and gas business, but actually kind of a better and cleaner barrels will be important. And actually that therefore creates a lot of opportunity and disciplines and context that we've all been familiar with for years. I think at the same time, many of the skills we have today just remain critical in a much more diversified energy mix. And many of those skills are transferable. Things like core skills, project management, finance, trading, but also how we take one skill and discipline and apply it in a different context. So a well site leader, for example, could become a wind site leader. I think particularly when you look at the subsurface space, geoscientists today that work in exploration and production very feasibly could be working in our carbon capture and storage opportunities or on offshore wind projects. And those core skills will be a lot of what enables us to deliver the transition, but also make for some really exciting opportunities. And that's alongside kind of skills areas that get more and more important that we may not have thought about before as much and open up new streams. So clearly specialized skills around solar, wind, bioenergy, etc., hydrogen. But also, as we think about an increasing number of customer touch points, that wider set of skills around things like customer experience, integration, also become important. And I think that's where a really exciting kind of journey of skills that we need and will demand. And people often ask me, what does that mean for upskilling opportunities? And I think in many ways, like those core skill sets still apply, and it's just taking them into a different context. And I'll talk about kind of what that means a bit more, but those opportunities are there, and we'll still see people kind of the projects we've got coming online in the next 5-6 years focused on producing cleaner, better barrels with higher margins. But we'll also see people going into kind of running offshore wind, hydrogen and things like that. And kind of one example is Louise, who runs our hydrogens business, deep wells expert. Spent her career in wells, studied petroleum engineering, if I remember rightly, and is now heading up our hydrogen business as something that's really important to the transition, but really rests on those skills they learned throughout their career. And I think that transferability bit brings me to a final point I'll make on kind of what does all this mean for education as well. And I mean, as a company, we've invested in education for decades, and ultimately it connects really well with our purpose and what we do. And to Alix's point, it's a business imperative. If we don't get the skills we need, we have issues. And I think that kind of work and what we've done in that space, ranging from core early years engagement and how we get people interested in STEM and engineering, through to how we build the quality of teachers in classrooms, how we put good quality assets, is really important to us as a company. I think the one thing that gets more and more important to us over the years is that point around transferability and what it will take. Like in the business world, we're dealing with more ambiguity, and often you're needing to really kind of navigate a lot of change. And actually that resilience, that adaptability to a constantly changing environment is becoming increasingly important in careers. And we talk a lot about the term global competence, a kind of broad term that talks about things like critical thinking, problem solving, intercultural understanding, and alongside all the kind of hard skills that you need, and that I'm sure kind of Martin and Jonathan will talk more about what they're doing in that space, including some of the work we've been partnering with Jonathan on. Actually also building that resilience and adaptability is going to be increasingly key. So I think that role of the education system in both building technical but also adaptive skills is going to be really critical to help people navigate that transition. And I'll close on that, and yeah, just a huge thank you again for inviting us on this evening.
Thank you, Carl. Jonathan, do you want to go next?
just unmute myself. Well, thank you very much for inviting me to be on this SPE panel. Nice to be surrounded by engineers. I always like to be surrounded by engineers, being a geologist. So I thought from my point, I'm going to just focus on the impact on universities, the impact of energy transition on universities, and what the challenges are briefly, the opportunities, and where our response is to that. It is quite a challenging time for universities at the moment to know where we fit in the training, in terms of training. We are seeing, and we have seen over the last 5 years, maybe even longer than that, quite a stark reduction in graduate intake, especially from the UK students, into the traditional areas of petroleum geoscience, petroleum engineering. And as a result, we're seeing quite a seismic shift in these courses. I mean, a number of courses have closed. Imperial, Martin will talk about that, have closed and are redesigning their courses. Liverpool closed, Derby's closed, UCD closed. And a number of other courses have had to rebrand themselves and are now looking at where they fit in this market. So we want to be attracting, and I think the industry wants to be attracting, the best students into geoscience and engineering related to energy. And I think at the moment, we're struggling with the message to get those students to come into that industry. So that's a message all the way from the undergraduates, but all the way down to even to schools, because they're the feedstock that feed into undergraduates. Undergraduates feed into the master's courses, which I'm particularly interested in. And of course, the master's students are the ones that feed into research. And if we don't have the master's students, we're going to struggle to find the right people to do the research, especially in the UK, but also globally. So that's some of the challenges we've got. We've lost studentships from industry and support from industry to a certain extent. And we're having to redesign our programs, but we're redesigning the programs with a very fluid market out there. So it's difficult to know what the market is in terms of what where we're going to put the students, where the job market is, to design the programs to fit that job market. We don't want to be producing students that can't get jobs. So we're all in the business of trying to produce students that are fit for the market, and that's what we want to be doing. And the other challenge, which I think is very important, is there's an awful lot of talk about energy transition and geoscience and engineering, and these events like we see now with the SPE are very good. But I think we do need to think about how we get the communication to the right people. I mean, everybody on this panel now and everybody actually in the audience is obviously very focused and understands some of the problems, and that's why you've attended this meeting. But we need to be getting the message to people who aren't on this panel and who aren't in this meeting, who really don't understand about energy transition and the role of geoscientists and engineers. And that's our big challenge, I think, going forward. So in terms of opportunities, though, I would agree everything that has been said already in terms of opportunities. It's a huge global market. We're seeing seismic shifts in our drive for renewables. We know there's future opportunities, both in sustainable oil and gas and improving our capacity to get oil and gas out in a more sustainable way. Geothermal energy, which is in its infancy, but it seems to be growing very rapidly. And of course, CCS as well. And CCS in particular, carbon capture and storage, uses almost identical skills to petroleum geoscience skills. It's the same skill set. Instead of taking the fluids out of the ground, we're going to put the fluids back in the ground. And in some cases, even back into the fields where we took the oil and gas out of. You're aware of that. So I think there is a great opportunity out there, and we all see that, but we need to sort of match our aspirations and how we can tackle that opportunity. And that's where we're struggling with at the moment. So the response from academia, as we mentioned before, universities are looking at MSc courses. Unfortunately, geology courses and to a certain extent engineering courses have always been relatively small courses in the scheme of things. And universities are businesses now, and they need business models, and courses with only 10 students on or 15 students on are not viable in the modern world we are in at the moment. So we need courses to be bigger, to be viable. And that's a challenge. And that's why a number of these courses I mentioned before have collapsed, because they don't have the numbers. So we need to be attracting good quality students, and we need the big numbers. So we need to rebrand. We need to get better communication. In Manchester, for instance, and I know Martin's going to talk about Imperial. But in Manchester, for instance, This year, 2021, we brought in 2 new MSc courses, Geoscience for Sustainable Energy, which is geared to more focused on geothermal energy, hydrogen and CCS. But some of those modules are still going to be taught with petroleum geoscience, because we're still running the petroleum geoscience course and still expect to get reasonable numbers on that. And then our petroleum engineering degree was also not attracting students. So we've now got subsurface energy engineering, which again, will have a broader remit, but still teach a lot of the same core skills. But the other thing I want to talk about before I end is we recognized this a year or 2 years ago, actually, as a group of academics in universities. And so we did establish a new center. It's called the Energy Transition Center for Masters Training. It's a collaboration of over 18 universities, both universities, the traditional universities you might think of in petroleum geoscience and engineering, like Manchester, Imperial, Aberdeen, Heriot-Watt, but also new energy universities, called Glasgow, we've got Edinburgh in there that haven't done traditionally oil and gas. And we've come together as a collaboration, and we're collaborating with industry. So companies like BP and Shell and Eni and Equinor are all involved in this, plus new industry, hydrogen companies as well, and with government to try to pull things together to see what we can do in a collaborative way to try to get the message out there and also build the market. So our mission, very briefly, I know time's of issue. So our mission is to, first of all, we're trying to promote access to resources. So we have a shared platform where all the universities are sharing resources in energy transition or energy research that any university, not only in the UK, but universities globally can look at. So we're trying to outsource this as well to the developing world, where they do have limited access to some of these resources. And I think that is part of the UK's remit, really. We should be a global leader in this, and this is a way to do that. There's also a lot of material on there. We're always looking for more materials to go on there. We're going to be developing collaborative training programs, both collaborative master's programs, but also continual professional development programs, because we know there's a big upskilling requirement, and the universities want to be part of that, to be developing courses, short courses or diploma courses that can upskill petroleum geoscientists, petroleum engineers, and give them the skills into the new markets in renewables as well. And the final thing about this is communication, because we know as academics that when you talk to first year students who just come in, they really aren't seeing all the information that's out there, because it's very disparate, it's on lots of sites. And we do have a tendency in a world of experts to talk to ourselves about the problems, and we don't realize we're not actually communicating to the people we want to be communicating with. And we also know that in the modern world, if it's more than 2 clicks away on a phone or on a laptop, nobody goes any further. So we need to have one place where students can access information on lots of things, access information from government, access information from academia, and access information from universities. And so this is what this site hopes to do. So we have a website and we have a learning hub that's already up and running. And we hope this will, we're pushing this very hard to be quite a powerful joint venture amongst all the universities and industry. And maybe at the end of this session, we'll put up the website link and we can all look at that at the end. That's my first part anyway.
Thank you very much. I think Alison has just joined the link as well to the website, to the CNT website you were mentioning. Thank you, Jonathan. Martin?
Okay, well, thank you.
Can you go next?
Yeah, thank you very much. I've actually just got a few slides, but don't worry, it's not going to be an excessive number. Okay, so I'm not going to repeat, many of the excellent comments that have already gone before, and particularly Jonathan in terms of looking at education. So I'm going to sort of focus in on what we've done at Imperial College. So here's a nice picture of Imperial from the air. We do attract students from all around the world, and as Jonathan has referred to, we are seeing a boom in applicants, really good qualified applicants who want to study engineering and science, but we are seeing a decline in specifically petroleum related applications. Okay? So we've been teaching petroleum-related subjects since 1913. It's actually engraved on the entrance of the Royal School of Mines. MSc program since the 1970s, you know, to deal with the North Sea oil, and our current programs were redesigned about 25 years ago. Okay? So that's fine, but yeah, programs that are focused on hydrocarbon exploration and production are not, you know, one might say explicitly aligned with our college's stated position on sustainable development and climate change targets, and that's something that all universities are wrestling with. Our fundamental skills, however, as has been emphasised, are useful in other subjects, right? Geothermal energy and carbon dioxide storage have been mentioned, but that somehow isn't brought out in the current course content. And maybe very significantly is there are other skills, particularly computational skills, machine learning, data science. These are what's in demand from employers in a wide range of disciplines, and it's including the oil and gas industry. And again, that's not really something that we're bringing out in our current curriculum. So what we want to do for the future is we're not turning our back on oil and gas. We're still going to need well-trained scientists and engineers. That has been, you know, pointed out by everyone, but the industry is changing. So we are going to discontinue our current programs, petroleum geoscience from this academic year, petroleum engineering from next, but we're going to launch a new course. And we're calling it GEMS, Geoenergy with Machine Learning and Data Science. And that is going to have a broader remit and a much more computational basis. Okay? And we value your input, you know, into how we design, you know, the details, what we should introduce into the curriculum. I've got a picture here of Professor Alan Gringarten. This is more for the historical note. He was the one who redesigned our current petroleum engineering course 25 years ago, and obviously we're redesigning it now, you know, for the next generation of geoscientists and engineers. And here's my final slide, just to show how it ties in. Where we are seeing a boom in applications is things associated with computational science. So we have lots of students with good computational skills who want to apply it to real problems. Okay, we've got a new MSc starting up that has an emphasis on data science and machine learning and the geosciences. And this new course that we're going to launch in 2022 feeds into that, builds on the computational basis, but then looks at geoscience, geophysics, fluid flow, geomechanics, and then the applications to the energy transition. So I will finish there. As I said, I think it's exciting times, lots of new developments, and there is an opportunity both for current engineers and the next generation of engineers to develop skills that are going to help address the energy transition and the enormous challenge of dealing with climate change while providing enough energy for the world. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Martin. That is indeed really exciting times. So that brings us nicely to the panel discussion itself. If you do have any questions, please post them in the chat box, and we'll have 20 minutes at the end to discuss the questions from the audience. So I'll start with my first question then, which is, what new skills is the energy industry expecting from graduates and existing staff going forward? If anyone wants to start.
I think we should hear from industry first, right? Let Jonathan and I come in second, right? You're the guys who know what you want.
Yeah, and I think it's a question, and I know Alix has been doing some work well around what does that future pipeline of skills look like that we are in the process of kind of grappling with as well, because there's so much uncertainty in the industry. It's very hard to map out long term exactly what it is you want and need, and I think Alix may talk to some of that. I think ultimately, you back to some of the remarks I shared earlier, kind of many of those, I think the soft skills and the global competence is going to become increasingly important kind of to navigate throughout people's careers. I think on a technical level, that's where, like, yeah, that's where a lot of the existing technical disciplines we've always wanted and needed still remain really, really important. And we talk about, yeah, within the kind of subsurface disciplines, they still remain critically important. I think the interesting thing is how the context shifts that you're going to be working in and the context evolves. So clearly we've often thought about that in a petroleum perspective, but what about offshore wind, hydrogen, carbon capture and storage, bioenergy? And again, same core disciplines and skills, but a different context in which to apply it. I think that's the shift that's going to evolve over time.
I'd absolutely echo those comments, Carl. As both of us, I think, said earlier, that we're pretty confident that the level of occupational transferability is really high, by which we mean the core skills are going to be very readily transferable. And the difference is going to be around where those skills are applied. So there will be a need to look at training in risk assessment, safety procedures. What are the differences if you're working in nuclear, for example? I'm in Aberdeen, but where, you know, in Scotland, nuclear is a bit of a dirty word, but I can say that here. So we had a webinar with the nuclear sector last year to try and help people who've been displaced from oil and gas find work. And someone from the Nuclear Skills Academy said, you know, you don't have an oil and gas screwdriver and a nuclear screwdriver. You could all apply the same skills in a different area. I think that, but coming back to the point Carl made, touching on soft skills, I think it's tremendously exciting at the moment, but there's also a lot of uncertainty out there, some of which is related to the energy transition, but some of which is just part of the volatility that we live with in oil and gas. So I think some of the qualities that would be good to try and engender would be resilience, curiosity, being comfortable with change, because what I envisage going forward is that people won't stay in oil and gas or in offshore wind or in carbon capture and storage, but will move backwards and forwards across the whole energy sector.
And if I can just add to that quickly before I hand back to Martin and Jonathan, the other piece there is it's not just over the course of your career, it's project by project. You might go from working on one context to another. And I actually think you've got one of our folk who's joining the next panel you talked about, has done just that and has spent time, like we're using our innovation and engineering organization across various different disciplines, from oil and gas projects through to hydrogen, through to CCUS. So when we talk about that comfort with change, it's not just about that change over kind of year by year through your career. It's the fact that you could go from one project to another in very different contexts, which there's a ton of excitement and a ton of opportunity in, but it does require those skills that Alix was talking about. Jonathan, Martin, I'll hand back to you.
Yeah, I mean, I can add, I mean, this is our traditional curricula were really stuffed full of specific content based along, working in a, independent oil company and doing certain things. And that's changed. So what we're doing is we are moving a little bit back to emphasizing the basic skills and a lot more project work. So computational skills, geoscience skills, engineering skills, and then here's a project in CCS, here's a project in geothermal, and being adaptable. So rather than having, a toolkit that doesn't change throughout your career, it's some basic skills that allow you to acquire new ones as we go along. And I think that's where the educational aspect has changed. And then adding on, as the industry develops, very specific skills that we can bring in, experts from industry to help.
Yeah, I agree with Martin on that. I think that's the way most of going. I think there is a risk, though. I think we have to. We've mentioned before, and this is the SPE, of course, that we have got 20 or 30 years probably minimum of oil and gas development. And if we're not producing some specialists out there, we have an aging workforce, a workforce that has, to a large extent, the very aging workforce have been removed in the last 5 years and shed from most companies. And if we don't keep some specialism, in there, you could find you produce a lot of generalists, but not enough specialists to actually drive things forward if you're not careful. And the UK has been world leaders in this. We've led the world in petroleum geoscience and petroleum engineering, and there is a risk that we'll just turn that off and leave that to somebody else to do it. It'll be the Chinese, it'll be the Americans. So we need to be careful we don't remove all this expertise that we've got, expertise in training and teaching, and the expertise, because we do need them as well. We do need them. We're not turning oil and gas off tomorrow, as Alexa said.
That's true. That's true. And do you believe the change should go into schools as well? Do you believe that the school education need to evolve as well to adapt to a transition?
Yeah, the issues with schools is a big issue. I mean, there is a lot of activity going on in universities to try to talk to schools, because we know there's an issue in both geoscience and engineering of turning school children into STEM students and engineering students and geoscience students. So there is a lot of activity in all universities going on in that area. But geoscience in particular, just looking at geoscience, we do have a big mission actually to try to get them, because they don't learn geology now or geoscience at school. They learn it in, I've got young children, they learn it in chemistry and they learn it in geography. So they're not as focused on that subject. So we need to make sure they're still looking at these subjects when they come to university. But I think they've been more successful at that over the last few years, actually. It's some of that activity that's gone on in the last 2 or 3 years seems to be paying fruit already, I think.
And I think there's also just tremendous amounts of work to do, as much progress as we make in that space. And I think we talk about schools, which are definitely a component of that. I mean, we were involved years back in funding some of the research around science capital in the UK and what gets people in. And I think one of the common misconceptions is you catch someone at the age of 16 and get them on the right career track and then it's job done. Actually, that work starts way earlier, and it starts in a much more diverse set of places. Schools is clearly a big part of it. Parents and carers and their perceptions of careers in science and in STEM, even into kind of the wider kind of material through social media and other things that young people are exposed to. Actually, unless really early we break some of those misperceptions about, oh, engineering is not for me, because we're never going to move the dial on it. And we're never going to see, like, the pipeline has disappeared years before we're trying to get it as employers, and years even before the universities on this call are trying to get it into their courses. And so I think there's a lot there. We've been involved in some of the Royal Academy of Engineering's work around their This Is Engineering campaign, really trying to break some of those perceptions of what these careers look like. And I think there's a tremendous amount more work to do there. And such a critical space to address this.
I absolutely agree with both Jonathan and Carl. And one of the other issues, of course, is that teachers and parents, as Carl has said, are hugely important as influencers. And if they're really switched off about oil and gas, then we're kind of on a hiding to nothing. So we're putting a lot of effort into that too, to getting to teachers to explain what the opportunities are, the importance of oil and gas in the energy mix, and that we have the capacity to make a huge contribution to the solution.
Okay, thank you. And how do you believe the oil and gas industry can continue attracting the talent and skills that is needed to play its part in ensuring a smooth energy transition?
Do you want me to pick that one up first?
Go ahead.
Okay, so I've been in this industry a long time, and every year we start talking about what are we doing about young people, and there's a huge amount that has been done, as Carl says, and I've certainly been part of BP's efforts in the past. But I think we sometimes beat ourselves up too. And if I give an example, this year we have a cross-industry apprenticeship scheme that takes, in good years, probably about 120 apprentices a year to develop as technicians. This year, we've had 1,500 applications. So that for me is a good news story. We're still getting the message out there that this is an industry with prospects. On the other hand, less than 5% of those were women. So there's a huge amount to do in that area to increase diversity. So while we have some encouraging signs, there are, and I'm cognizant of what Martin and Jonathan have said about fall off in applications for particular courses. We certainly have a lot to do to continue to tell our story and to reach other parts of the population.
Okay. Anyone else want to add anything?
Are we still on? I think industry in particular we need to get a joined up positive narrative about energy transition and about how industry needs to come back quite strongly against the negative aspirations and the negative thoughts that are out there, that it's still the old oil industry, it's still oil and gas, it's the polluting industry. I think most of us who work in this industry or have done and are now teaching in it as well know that it's the energy industry that will pull us out of this problem as well. It's the energy industry that's got both the capital to do that, it's got the skill set to do that. And we're seeing it now quite actively. I mean, you only need, every day virtually, you see online new investments in geothermal, new investments in wind and renewable, CCS. And we just need to get that message out. Also, because I think even more so now in this modern world, for students to do a degree and then to do a master's degree or PhD, they need to see the career pathway, because they're investing huge amounts of their own money or their family's money in this. They're coming out with £50,000 debt, £100,000 of debt. So we need to show that positive pathway out there and a positive outlook for those careers. And of course, the last few years has not been very positive, unfortunately, in terms of careers. We've seen most downturn in the industry, the low oil price. So we need to fight back against that, actually, quite strongly.
And of course, I would say this, that there is a ton of opportunity out there, and it is an exciting place to be. I mean, at the same time, I don't think we can kid ourselves. We've got, like, the industry has an image problem, and we've got a real challenge on how we address that. But look at the commitments that organizations like us have made, the scale of change, the opportunity, the big societal challenges that we're tackling, as Jonathan said. Like, fundamentally, the purpose we've got as an organization should energize people and energize people to come and work in this space. And I think there's a lot we've done behind the scenes around how we work internally, the leadership that are driving that change that supports that. But I think that big kind of, linking this back to a real societal and human challenge is an opportunity. And as Jonathan said, we just need to get the word out there.
Yeah, I'll echo that. I think it is about communication. Right? The oil industry doesn't, have an extremely good image, particularly among young people, and it is about communicating the importance of the industry, the fact that there is going to be an energy transition, and the exciting challenges associated with being part of that transition. Right, communication is absolutely key here.
Okay, and you also mentioned that we do have a lot of transferable skills, but how do you think we can retool the existing oil and gas workers? Do you believe a short course would be enough, or do you think it should be an entirely new education? What people can do now?
There's quite a lot to grapple with within that, and I think kind of I suppose there's what does a learning strategy look like for an organization like this, as this is the level of change that we're now talking about. And I think you've got some of the things around what is a culture of, how do you create a culture of learning in the organization? How do you create that? Okay, I'm going into a new context that I've not worked in before. What do I need to know? How do I figure this out quickly? And also, how do I bring the best of the skills I've already got? And I think within that, there's a lot of kind of just-in-time learning. What do I need to get the job done that's going to be critical? But the other thing I often talk to colleagues about is the importance of a lot of the informal learning levers in this space, like mentors, though peers that have worked on similar problems before and how you access those. And I think often it's very easy to go, we can throw a formal learning course and budget at it. But that is often only going to work if you really cement it with some of those more informal on-the-job opportunities, the mentoring, the peer guidance around this. So I think from an employer perspective, like there's many tools that we'll use in the toolkit. And the importance of formal learning will remain, but it's amongst a very broad set of tools.
I'd certainly echo that. As I said earlier, I think on the whole, core skills are readily transferable. It will be the contextual learning as people move perhaps from oil and gas into CCUS or offshore wind. They will need to have some wraparound training probably, but we're working, as I say, to identify that. We are, as Carol said earlier, grappling with sorting out what does that roadmap look like, because we don't have all the answers yet. This is a journey that's going to take 10, 15, 20 years, so we've got a way to go.
Yeah, in universities, one thing I think we've recognised while we set up the CMT as well was sometimes the expertise in these areas is quite spread out in the universities. It's not in one university. So by collaborating, there's quite a strong mood amongst the UK universities and the academics among that. So where we can collaborate to teach a joint course, bring in expertise maybe from Aberdeen and then Glasgow and with Manchester Imperial, we think that's quite important actually, because we find that with these new energies, it's not clear that all the expertise is in one location, and it may never be, because the numbers of academics are smaller in these universities now in these areas. So we're looking at that, and that's one of the things. And we hope to be able to develop short courses, continual professional courses that people can take. And we've seen the revolution in this year, during COVID year, of online, the ability to do this much more effectively online. We've all gained huge amounts of skills in that. So we're much better at doing that now than we were a year ago. So I think we should be able to do that. And that would be ideal for the 15-year, or 5 to 15-year geologists and engineers who just need some additional skill set to push them over into these areas, to get them more employable in these broader areas, be that hydrogen or CCS or geothermal, because as you said, their core skills are pretty transferable. You know, a fluid in the subsurface, as Martin knows, a fluid in the subsurface is a fluid in the subsurface. So whether you bring it out or put it back in again.
Yeah, and that, I mean, we're pooling our resources, we're doing everything online. I think for someone who's motivated, you know, we will develop the material that allows people to learn new things while, that strengthen their core skills. So I think the core skills are sort of things, you often learned in university, when you really devoted yourself full time. But I think for people who are sort of 10, 15 years out, there are resources, and there will continue to be better and better quality resources for that learning. And that's one thing that I think that this pandemic, as Jonathan's pointed out, has really transformed.
And this industry has spent 40 years learning. If you look what the industry can do now, it couldn't do in the late 70s. It's absolutely fantastic. It's an industry that has grown and survived by facing challenges and finding solutions. And there aren't people out there already skilled in CCUS and hydrogen. We need to find the way.
And what about those who want to stay within the industry? Should they start getting worried about their job security?
I think that's fair.
Well, I'll just jump in and say that we're not turning the taps off anytime soon. I mean, there are many studies and including the Climate Change Committee, which show that the demand for oil and gas is going to be there for decades to come.
I think echoing that, I mean, the research is out there. I mean, if you look at, we're still going to need those core hydrocarbon skills, and what the pipeline of stuff coming online in the next 5 years, and there's that, plus there's all of the kind of low carbon energy space that grows and grows. And I think, yeah, in an integrated energy company, there is a ton of opportunity out there.
Yeah. Although I think it was interesting what Alix said, you know, the numbers, that's one thing it'd be really interesting to find, to try and capture, is what the demand is likely to be going forward, and predicting that demand over the next 5 to 10 years. Because the industry is changing. It's changing also by the use of technology, of course. So we're more efficient in using individuals. So most of the companies like BP and Shell, they've downsized the workforce, but they're doing twice as much work because they're able to do more work with the technology that they're able to access. But we do need to get an idea, because the universities need some idea of what the demand is likely to be in terms of master's students, PhD students, both UK students, but also globally as well. And I don't think we don't have that sorted at the moment. We don't really understand what the demand's like. Maybe nobody does, but maybe that will come in the next few years. But
you're right, Jonathan. We don't have that, and that's one of the key deliverables under my stream of the transition deal. And I think so much hangs off of that, because once we understand that, then we can get into the nuts and bolts, as you say, of what training do people need, what courses do you need to develop or change, what top-up skills do people need. And the plan is that we'll have a good picture within a year.
But I don't think we should, the UK shouldn't be, we should be aspirational as well, because the UK has been a global trainer. We've been training the world. So just looking at what, I mean, and if you look in a company like BP or Shell or all these companies, you know, in Sunbury, you'll have people from all over the world in that office. You've recruited globally, but often they've been trained in the UK. A lot of them were trained in the UK, went back to their countries and came back. So we should be looking at what the global market is out there. I mean, we know, you know, from, you know, our students are globally, you know, it's a massive set of students out there. So, and that's a big market for the UK still going forward. We shouldn't lose that market.
I think just another reflection to share on that demand story. I think there's a lot of conversation in the industry about there's a lot of uncertainty and there's a lot of unknowns, and to some extent that's so true that it should be completely unremarkable. I think at the same time, like, we know there's a number of scenarios that may unfold that we can work against. And sure, no, we don't know that which one of those scenarios becomes true, but at least, and even our own work in the energy outlook to figure out what might this look like and at what pace, and what if you push the accelerator harder, how big a difference does this make? We're not flying without assumptions on what the industry might look like in the future and how it might evolve. And actually that gives you the concreteness to go, well, we might not know the one single true answer, but we can at least start looking at what does that mean for talent and skills under the different scenarios, and place reasonable assumptions on that.
Thank you. We are getting quite a few questions from the audience. If Alison wants to, Alison, do you want to read a few of them?
Yeah, I can nip in, give you a little break, Elizabeth. Yeah, some great questions, and some of them, you know, relate very much to what we're talking about. I think the demand and having to get a better picture, and there being a bit of a, I think I'm sensing the frustration of the lag in potential jobs. So question from Lisa is, with a large number of experienced 15 years plus geoscientists out of work right now, who have proven transferable skills, will industry take a chance on them and train them in new energy skills? So I think people are trying to understand what to do right now, especially if they're out of work. So I don't know if people have got some thoughts on that very immediate issues that people are facing. I saw Jonathan nod, so maybe he has a...
No, I can imagine. Yeah, I was reading the thing. Yeah, I think it's a big challenge, actually, because most of the new industries, apart from the big players like BP and others, the smaller companies that are moving into this space, into geothermal and hydrogen, they're very, very small companies. So they're not geared up yet to take on large numbers of staff. And we're probably talking a few years yet before they get to that sort of scale. So that is the problem with this transition we're in. There's a gap, and of course people need to be employed in that 2 or 3 year or 5 year gap before we get a full-blown geothermal industry in the UK or a full-blown CCS moving very rapidly. So it's a challenge, yeah.
So I suppose I could ask specifically to Carl, not to put you on the spot, but a BP, for example, is an organisation of a lot of employees. Are you looking at the personal development of your employees and training them up internally?
Yeah, I think there's two parts to that. I mean, one is actually the pace of growth in other areas. That means we are hiring and hiring actively. And if you kind of look on our website at the moment, and the number of places we're hiring to keep up with kind of what's going on, particularly in those kind of low carbon spaces, and also in wider kind of hot skills like digital, there is a continued kind of hiring agenda. And then internally, there's also the question of how do we continue to skill and equip our people with the skills they need. And back to what I was saying earlier, that's both the formal learning opportunities, and that's also the opportunities to work on different types of work, different contexts, and bring those same skills to life. So I think there is, and particularly kind of that skilled and experienced work, like that stuff in some ways gets easier when you've got a ton of experience. Like the actually like learning the ropes when you already have a really core skill set and set of disciplines. At least you've got that kind of hard skill to master. It's even harder when you're kind of a fresh graduate learning both a new and as Alix was saying, some of these contexts and some of these technologies, no one has the answer. We as an industry have to figure it out. And I think that the ability to rest on a real kind of hard skill set there is going to be powerful.
I mean, can I ask, sorry to pick on you, Carl, but there's a specific question around wind. Obviously, offshore wind is incredibly important to the UK, growing hugely. BP are getting into it. So Rita asked the question, for the wind energy resource, can the skills of the petroleum engineer be transferred? I mean, that's an area where maybe it's not so obvious. Others may have thoughts on that as well.
And one of the examples, and probably, well, it goes back to some of what Jonathan and Martin were saying earlier. It's like, well, a lot of those subsurface disciplines, we still have to put things under seabeds when we're talking offshore wind. And a lot of the same kind of disciplines are going to be equally as relevant. And yeah, as you said, things go in the ground, they come back out. It's still, whether you're doing that in an oil and gas context or whether you're doing that with massive offshore wind installations, there's a lot of transferability there we might not think about. Okay. I'm stepping into your space, Martin.
Yeah, have a comment.
No, I agree. I mean, there are really two things here. One is engineering the subsurface, right? Using the subsurface. You know, we've done this as a store of energy, which we've extracted. We're obviously going to put CO2 back underground. There's dealing with water resources. There's dealing with hydrogen storage potentially. And then there are other things that are more sort of what I might describe as geotechnical, right? Yeah, you build, you know, you have a wind farm offshore, right? I mean, you've got to have some structure on the seabed. So there's a lot here that's very interesting. And some of those applications we are trying to bring into, you know, C courses, as Jonathan's pointed out, there is that expertise, one might say, in the collection of universities that are, you know, industry partners. So I think there's lots of exciting things to do here. But I do appreciate, for many people, it's a very difficult period because it's a transition. So many of the traditional jobs have been lost. And as Jonathan's pointed out, many of the new renewable jobs are in smaller companies, where it's a little bit more difficult, to have the scale of recruitment and investment in education and training that companies of the size of BP can muster.
Okay. I mean, that actually leads quite nicely onto another question from Mohammed, talking about some of those soft skills. You talked about curiosity, resilience, adaptability, and I think there's lots of things around project management and agile ways of working. He's wondering, were these things becoming more important? Are they becoming part of academic courses? And perhaps, you know, is it an area where academia are working more with companies to make sure the students have those soft skills when they're going out into the marketplace, given it's a hard marketplace now?
I mean, We do this anyway, and we're going to build on this, which is more project work, more teamwork, a little bit more emphasis on presenting your work both in a written and oral fashion, and presenting a work of a team. So we do that. Students, of course, when they're at university, try to be quite individualistic, right? So that, they like doing their exam and getting their marks, but it is something we're bringing out. But the soft skills really have to be learning by doing. Right? And it is something that people develop, I think, throughout their career. So it's something we start and we try and emphasize at university, but it is something that people need to continue to develop, because there's a little bit of a difference of someone fresh out of university who may be technically very enthusiastic, but maybe a little bit naive, and those skills are developed throughout their career.
Yeah, I agree with Martin on that. I mean, the big problem we always have in master's courses is that in the UK, of course, they're only 12-month courses, which is, students like that because it gets them in the marketplace very quickly. But if you put something in a course, what do you take out? And most of our MSc courses are really packed. So again, that's one of the things the CMT is looking to offer, is to offer potentially some courses that could run after you've passed your MSc. You've already got your sort of technical skills, but you want to learn more soft skills. So we could develop some courses that you could take after your MSc, which would make you better placed to get jobs in industry in these areas. So these type of soft skills, which I think would be quite beneficial. And those things could also would help people who've maybe not been able to get employment over 1 or 2 years, especially during this downturn, and want to do something to upskill them just to get them back into that market, that job market. Because if you haven't been able to get a job in 2 years after having an MSc, you sometimes need a little bit of assistance to get back into that job market. So we're looking at things like that as well.
That's good to hear. Yeah.
The other thing I'd add is as much as the spotlight at the moment in this discussion is on universities, it goes further back than that. And like if someone's entering university without a lot of those core project-based working skills and the ability to navigate those situations, like it's on the universities to play a huge catch-up role. But actually, how do we embed this into schooling, education, and things like that? And one of the things we do are kind of global STEM academies that we run, which are 15 to 18 years of age focus. One of the big things they do is a project-based learning experience. And it's a great way to reinforce that global competence at a slightly earlier age. Get youth collectively problem solving around something and get them working in a team and all of the clunkiness that comes with working in a team sometimes. And I think the more we can get that embedded into the education system as well, the more actually there's less. Universities are not playing catch up, they're building on a core skill set that exists. And the education system's done some tremendous work to embed that, but I still think the more we can do to reinforce that will pay back in dividends.
Interesting. Yeah. Alix, did you want to comment on that one?
I'm not sure that I can add anything to they were all great comments, but one thing that kind of came through my mind, particularly when Carl was speaking about people at school, I think as we progress through our working lives, one of the things that's really important is self-awareness. So
because if you I thought your expression about the clunkiness of working in a team was great, Carl, because the first few times you do it, it doesn't always work because people are competitive, they want to shine or whatever. But we know in business, a team of people who all want to be the leader or chief executive of the organization is just not going to work. So one of the important things I think that comes with experience, I don't necessarily mean work experience, is understanding what makes you tick. Do you want to be a technical expert? Do you want to lead a team of people? Do you want to get into the commercial world? What is it that excites you? And think about where you want to go, because it's not much fun being a square peg in a round hole.
I think just echoing that and building on it, Alix. I mean, the do you want to be a technical leader and a deep technical expert who is known for that, and do you want to manage big teams? Like, you can do both. But there are some individuals who will progress in their career and progress a very long way to senior technical roles, and neither like nor need to manage a team. And to the square pegs, round holes, actually knowing that and having that self-awareness and shaping an individual career around that just should lead to a much more satisfying career as well.
Yeah, great conversation. There's a couple more I want to get in, Elizabeth, and then I'll pass you back because you've probably still got some on your list that you want to ask. One here is around, as the universities are changing your courses, so Imperial changing it, others are changing it. So recent graduates don't have those skills, so they're going to look back and see what you guys are doing to change your course. And there's a question is there a way to help past graduates with some of those skills that you're now bringing in? It may speak to Jonathan's CMT, I guess, and the continued education. So.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what we want to be doing in the CMT. That's one of our missions, actually, is to help upskill, and that could be upskilling people who, like you say, are maybe only 2 or 3 years out of a degree, but are seeing the world changing very rapidly out there, and wonder whether their degrees fit for purpose in this modern world, and just need a bit of help to get on the job ladder. And also for the 10 to 15-year-old people who are technical people and managers as well, who also want to benefit from that. So I think there is a market out there, a demand out there for these type of courses. I mean, some of them will be met by private companies. I mean, we have companies like CGG and RPS, so they will deliver some of these courses. But what universities, of course, will probably deliver is courses, lower cost courses, online courses, more open access courses. And we want to do that, and that's one of our mission statements, really, in what we do. So I hope in the next year, certainly by the end of next year, we should be delivering some of these courses that should be available.
The other thing I'd add, and particularly in England, where the apprentice levy is in place, we increasingly will use professional apprenticeship models. So those who are already in the workforce and putting them through some of that training in order to build, and particularly some of the skills, I mean, Martin was showing on that slide earlier, like some of the data and analytics slides, skills, actually a very easy thing to build over an apprentice. I say very easy, I mean, it's a ton of work, but nonetheless, the mechanism is there for us to fund that training and enable people to go through it alongside their core day job. So when Jonathan says the demand is there, there's a lot of activity in that space around how do we top up those skills, and it is changing a little bit the perception of what an apprenticeship always means. That actually it's not. There is a very important entry route that I don't think we talk enough about around some of the more technical apprenticeship pathways. But often that's the only way apprenticeships are perceived. And actually, you look at a lot of people we have on apprentice type courses, and they are degree educated individuals who've gone into the workforce and a couple of years later want to top up their skills.
Okay. Now that's really, really interesting, because there's actually a few comments on here about apprenticeships. And I think you're right. I think it feels like the view of apprenticeships, people's understanding of it is maybe not as good as it could, and it's changing. And maybe that's something we should have a specific presentation on or session on, because I think even my understanding is probably not where it should be. And
it's a space that takes some demystifying, actually, and it takes someone who's navigated all of the apprenticeship standards and and there is a ton of work that goes on behind the scenes to try to figure out how we pair. When we start with a skill demand and a skill need in the business, there's a ton of behind the scenes work to match that to apprenticeship standards and courses we can offer. But I think excitingly, we do it and we're able to do it. And whether that's kind of core, and sometimes that actually is back to some of the more soft skills we talked about, people management, people leadership, project management, as well as some of those kind of hard, like data and technical skills. So I think that professional track of apprenticeships to me is a really exciting way to make the apprenticeship levy work well and develop those top up skills. I also do think, though, there are more opportunities to use apprenticeships rather than just degree pathways over the long term.
Right.
where do we really need a degree educated individual, and how do we move away from that and think about different training paths, etc., is probably a conversation, as you say, that warrants a whole panel discussion in and of itself.
Yeah. Alix, I know you're involved in apprenticeships. Did you have?
Yes, well, Carl mentioned something that always makes me come out in a cold sweat, and that's the apprenticeship levy. One of the challenges certainly your organisation, Carl, will have, because it operates north and south of the border, is that skills are a devolved issue, and the apprenticeship levy, we have to pay it in Scotland, but we don't have the clawback that you do in England. However, we are seeing new frameworks come forward. Particularly a very welcome development has been something called graduate apprenticeships, where existing members of the workforce can begin working towards a degree level qualification. So those frameworks are growing. I think that coming back to D&I, it's a real challenge to try and break the image of apprentices, and I think socially they're always seen as kind of second best, something you do if you don't make it to university. There's a huge amount of work to be done to raise the value, I think, of apprenticeships.
Yeah, from a university perspective, well, to be perfectly frank, the idea of apprenticeships has only reached my cognizance in the last 6 months, really, or a year, when we've started to have this initiative of the CMT. And as in our area of geoscience, we've never even considered it. I've never even heard it before. I know it's been in other areas of engineering already, electrical engineering. So it's something where the universities need to catch up rapidly, really, because this is a valuable income stream for universities, and a valuable way in which to get students and to link industry with academia as well. So it's definitely somewhere we need to catch up. But it is quite a mire of jargon, and I get lost when people talk to me about it. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, and it also recognises that not everyone learns in the same way. So what we found in the industry is that many people who thought university wasn't for them have gone on to do an apprenticeship, and have then gone on to do degrees, and have gone on to hold really senior roles in the industry, and they carry the love of their apprenticeship with them. I tell you, they're huge advocates.
Yeah.
I think that the point you raised as well earlier, Alix, around social mobility. I mean, I think it's no secret that the industry has not been on diversity and inclusion, has not always delivered the best results. And I think actually the energy transition also offers an opportunity for us to hopefully get that right and get better at that. And when we talk about kind of new skills areas, new contexts, etc., how actually do we take that as an opportunity and get it right? If we're going to see big pipelines of offshore wind technician apprenticeships down the line, how actually do we make that an appealing career to a more diverse audience, and really reach people who may never have considered this before, but actually would personally gain a lot from that career path, and where that career path would really value them being there. So I think it is, yeah, we've got to do something in that space as well.
Can I just bring in media into our conversation? How do you think it affects the opinion of people, and what role do you think mass media should actually be playing during this transition period?
I think it's very significant, and I think the industry needs to, one might say, be a bit more assertive. Right? There is a sort of default from the industry, which is, keep quiet, keep your head down, and everything will go away. And then to make statements that can be interpreted in a somewhat euphemistic fashion. So I think, this is serious. We do need to deliver energy, and we do need to deal with the threat of climate change, and we should be working together. And what distresses me is how antagonistic a lot of the debate can be. I think in many ways, there's a sort of responsibility on the industry to genuinely engage in that debate a little bit more openly, and to be very clear about what needs to be done. Now, and I know, of course, many companies, and BP is certainly one of them, making efforts in that direction. So I don't want to sound overcritical, but I think the way the industry is presented in much of the media is extremely hostile, and that does require very active and serious engagement from the industry to sort of be viewed as part of the solution rather than part of the problem.
And I don't know, Martin referenced some of our efforts in that space. I mean, I think one of the stances we have taken is actually, as a greening company, it is worth us being in the debate. And actually, we, to a lot of what Alix said earlier, like, we hold a lot of the skills that enable us to solve many of these problems. We hold many of the other resources that enable us to solve these problems. And actually, therefore, being present and being part of this debate is a big thing. I think that media perception, I think there's both a need for us to be in the debate, and I also think there's an opportunity over time to really get people to think differently about careers in this space. That actually, it's also back to what I was saying earlier about our purpose as being a reason to work here. It's solving some of the big challenges, and it's about that energy transition and that future. So I think there's a moment in time we're in now, but there's also a ton of opportunity at the back end.
Yeah, I'd agree, Carl. I mean, what we're talking about is literally world changing, and yeah, we do have a bit of an image problem. I'd just say I'm not going to say a lot about it, but just to provide some reassurance, we have a huge project on at the moment, the stakeholder engagement project, that is looking at all of this. Huge amount of investment and time going on in that. So your comments are welcome, and quite possibly expect a phone call. I think the question, if I heard it correctly, was about mass media. One of the things I'm really worried about is social media. And now I know very little about it. I don't engage at all, other than a little bit of twittering. But it seems to me we're living in a world where news and information is really dumbed down, and people get their information in sound bites. And so it makes it much more difficult to tell our story. So we really need to keep putting effort into that. And I guess we all have a role to play as well, not kind of deny that we work in oil and gas, but to sell what we can offer.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I mean, it has been a challenge in universities, all universities, because there's been this huge divestment debate going on, which paints all fossil fuel companies as being bad, and we just want to divest. And like I said, there's no nuance there. There's no idea that these companies are also part of the solution going forward, that they will drive new technologies. And we're probably all converted to that. We probably all believe in that, but we need to get that message across. I think we are seeing a change. I think there's been a change. I've seen a change, but whether that's quite got down to the undergraduate and the student level, I'm not sure yet. But there is a change in the feeling, because most of the energy companies, well, the companies have changed. They are changing into energy companies. They are actively now in all these spheres. We see them investing in geothermal. You see them investing in hydrogen. You see them investing in wind. So we are seeing that change. I think we just need to keep the pace up and to get that message out to the younger people as well. Be sure that they're really getting the message, because if they only get the message from certain websites or certain areas, then they're getting a skewed picture of what's really going on in the world. Often, like
sometimes there can be a nuanced debate. I mean, Imperial, for instance, down the road at the Science Museum, Shell has sponsored an exhibition on carbon capture and storage, and there have been environmental protests against that. And so the student union, there was a sort of motion to write and say, yes, we don't agree with it, and that was defeated. And there was in fact an attempt at a proper debate, because there is a nuance, right? Shell isn't the most popular company, among the wider undergraduate body. On the other hand, CCS is part of the solution. And so sometimes you do see them as a good debate, where people are properly engaged. But I agree, it's sometimes you do feel it's few and far between.
I also think there's something across all these comments about meeting people where they are almost. And actually we talk about the role of mass media, but if a lot of the youth that we want to engage and want to reach are on social media, almost back to the original point, we can talk into a vacuum of the individuals on this call, but we're not necessarily changing the minds of those individuals at all. And I think actually I've seen some really promising, and it impacts our own education work actually. Like if we want to reach teachers, we can put teaching resources onto a platform and ask teachers to go to that platform. A younger student is going to look at it and go, well, that's a hurdle. And actually, if I'm sitting on whatever social media platform is popular these days, then that's not where I'm going to go. And I think there is some great work out there around, I talked a bit earlier about the Royal Academy of Engineering's work, kind of massive social media campaigns that reach millions upon millions of people and really kind of get at some of that. And there's a scalability of doing that, there's an ease of doing that. And actually, if that's where the conversation is, how do we get there as well? Beyond kind of that original question of mass media.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I think we can take one more question from the audience. If Alison, do you want to read one out?
Yes, I am back, but I can't see any of the questions, and I'm not sure. Did you ask the SPE question, or shall I ask that?
No, yeah. I can ask. Yeah, that's okay. So there's a great question from the audience.
Yeah, I remember there wasn't. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Sorry about this.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so there's a question from the audience asking, what do you believe SPE can do to help the transition, and what can they do to help the industry?
Well, this has been a fantastic event from my perspective. I'm so glad it's being recorded, because I certainly want to share it with some of my colleagues, particularly around the engagement of others. So giving us the opportunity to hear what people are concerned about is fantastic from my perspective. Thank you.
I'd probably echo that. I think there's two things. One is being a part of the debate and actually the discussions here and what this can be a platform for. I also think, though, probably echoing a lot of what we talked about today, it's also what can you do as an individual to reach wider audiences. And I think there's something around all of us who work in the industry have a role in demystifying, in helping people see and understand these opportunities. So I think there's the debate here, but there's how you personally are involved in a lot of kind of wider outreach activity as well.
Yeah, I agree. I think the SPE is doing a great job at the moment. I just encourage you to collaborate, because there's lots of other societies out there. There's the PSGB, the Geological Society, other engineering societies. So I think collaboration is good to get one voice and to get a message out to a wider audience. But you're being very active in this space, actually. So I think I encourage you to keep going. Yeah, keep doing what you're doing.
Another really good feature of the SPE, right, is its engagement with students. Right? It's very good with student chapters. It gives support for student chapters. It gives free access to One Petro. And I think that's been a wonderful initiative. I mean, I'd like to see the SPE go further. I'd like to see them, put One Petro essentially open access. But I also think these events, and as Jonathan says, really engaging, with other fellow societies, but with wider society is also very significant.
Okay, Alison, do you think we have time for one more question?
If you have one, yes, my internet is still a little up and down, so I'll let you close out with one more question if you have one, Elizabeth.
Sure. Just go back to here. Yeah, sorry, Jonathan.
Well, there's a question. The very last question says, can I share the website for the energy transition as promised? So I could share that screen and you can ask.
Okay.
So just looking at that.
I think that's a good idea. That's probably a good way to.
So this is the logo, and this is the website. www.energy-transition.ac.uk, and there's a website which is independently hosted. And then from the website, if you go to open access, it takes you to the Learning Hub, where each of the universities and other organisations have got free material you can access, courses you can go on, MOOCs, and this is constantly being updated. We're just in the process now of putting new material on there all the time. So in the next year, this will become very large, I think. So please do access it. And if you've got any comments, or you want to put material on there, or you want to be involved, you could contact me. Very happy to take the link.
Thank you, Jonathan. Right, I will ask the last question, if you don't mind, Alison. Who do you believe should pay for the energy transition? I don't know, maybe Alix wants to start.
Sorry, I had a bit of trouble unmuting there. The levels of investment that are required to meet the targets of 2050 and 2045 in Scotland are prohibitive for industry on its own. We need to work with government, and indeed we've talked a lot about going forward, and the levels of investment will be a key deciding factor in just how many jobs and where those jobs are in the future. So I think it's a joint responsibility.
Not sure there's much to add to that. I think it was a great, yeah.
Well, okay. Thank you very much. Alison, would you like to add anything?
Yes, sorry, I'm still struggling with my internet here. I guess I just want to really thank everyone. If you can, perhaps I'll let Elisabetta. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I just want to say, thank you so much for joining us today. I think this was a really good debate. I've been wanting to make this happen for a long time with this kind of mix of people, and you guys have done a great job. Elisabetta's done a great job moderating some questions. So thank you very much. And I guess that will be a wrap, and we hope to see many of the audience back for our next session on the 22nd of June. So I'll let Elisabetta, anything else you want to say?
No, that's all. Just thank you very much for joining, and thank you very much for your time.
Yes.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, great discussion. Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Good evening. Bye.